Good afternoon, or almost good evening. This is our General Law Subcommittee number 5. We have 2 bills on the docket, and we are going to start with HB 590, Delegate Hayes. I just want to say the theme and kind of the goal of this subcommittee is to put guardrails on 2 unregulated markets that we have in Virginia today. And I'm hoping we can have a really good constructive discussion as we carve a path forward for these industries in the Commonwealth. Ultimately, this is an issue of transparency, consumer protection, public safety, and we have a duty to make difficult decisions on behalf of the constituents we represent. And it's a happy Groundhog Day. This issue seems to keep popping up. And I will, Delegate Hayes, you have the podium. Hold on, Delegate Hayes, we're going to do attendance. The clerk will open the rolls. The clerk will close roll. We have everybody's here. Thank you, committee, especially on a Friday afternoon, almost evening. It will be evening before we finish. Delegate Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. We have before us the skill games legislation. Obviously, we realize that gaming is here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we want to do all we can to regulate gambling here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and not to allow for the operation of such without guardrails. And so, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, if we consider the allowance of skill games during under the COVID restrictions that we had when there was lockdown, the Commonwealth, we allowed for the regulation of such and the enforcement as well. During that time, we were able to generate some 130, I believe it was, $1 million for the Commonwealth under those restrictions. And so realizing that there are some circumstances in which there is some operation, some skill games that actually have stood up in places unbeknownst to the authorities. We further believe that it's time that we regulate and tax the skill games. This request, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in my area where I am, is heavily supported by convenience store owners as well as many of the citizens who actually participate in the operation of the games as well. And so that is a strong request that comes from not only my constituents, but we begin to hear and see across the Commonwealth that to be the case. And so the bill that you have before you also points out that the enforcement we ask be done through the Department of ABC for those locations that also have ABC license, that we believe that leverage can help with the enforcement as well. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I am aware as of yesterday of a substitute that's been put before us and posted online. And in comparison, we know the original bill is 5 pages. The substitute is 71 pages, I believe. And that is the posture in which we stand here today. So I'll be brief with my
Thank you, Delegate Simon.
Move the adoption of the substitute.
Second.
Yep, we have a motion to adopt the substitute and a second. All those in favor of adopting a substitute, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The bill is properly in front of us, and I'll say that it's already been online, I think, at least 24 hours. So, and then we have some copies passed out. All right.
Mr. Chairman, if we may, there are some folks who are here to speak in reference to the substitute. Is when would that proper time be?
I think now's proper time, and I understand we also have
I think all three.
three people online too, so we'll go with the people here in person, and those who are, we'll put 20 minutes, for there's two online, so maybe we'll have 20 minutes for each side. You don't need to use every minute. It is Friday afternoon. If it does look like we need more time, I'm certainly amenable to that if the committee is amenable. But why don't we go with 20 minutes from each side? So go ahead, and everybody who is in support of the bill or the overall theme, if you will, of legalizing skill games, please come to the podium.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, wonderful to be with you on this Friday afternoon. Brian Moran, representing the Skill Game Coalition, made up of literally thousands and thousands of small businesses across this Commonwealth. We are here to request reasonable regulation, taxation, and enforcement of skill games. So we thank Delegate Hayes very much for his willingness to champion common sense skill game regulation to support Virginia small businesses. HB 590, originally written, was to support Virginia's most vulnerable small businesses. It reflected much of Virginia's prior experience with skill games. As you'll recall, in 2020, we regulated and taxed skill games. We created a COVID relief fund during 2020. ABC regulated our skill games. That's why 590 suggests ABC continue that regulation, since they have that experience and that expertise, and they have the experience of working with these hundreds of convenience stores and restaurants around Virginia. They have that relationship. They enforce the laws with respect to beer and wine and cigarettes and lottery. It also, as originally written, reflects a reasonable tax rate. In 2020, we imposed a $1,200 per month per terminal fee. That equates essentially to about a 15% tax rate. Now, why we went with a percentage? Well, because working with convenience store owners across Virginia, they felt a fee of $1,200 was too much for some of these micro businesses. They could not afford it. So we thought a percentage was a more equitable approach to imposing a reasonable tax. And finally, we after talking to many legislators, many of you from this dais, we felt a limit of 5 games per convenience store, 10 per truck stop was the appropriate number. It had been 8 in 2020. So that is why we put forward 590 and thank Delegate Hayes for carrying it. Now, with that said, the substitute does not achieve what we believe to be a workable, regulated skill game environment. But we do very much appreciate the legislative process. And indeed, it has many steps, and this is just one of them. So we truly respect and appreciate this subcommittee's work in advancing this process. We look forward to working together to ensure the survival of small businesses across Virginia, and believe at the end of this legislative process, after working together, we can indeed come together on a workable bill that will reasonably regulate, tax, and enforce skill games on behalf of our small businesses. So with that, Mr. Chairman, again, I thank you and this subcommittee for its work, and again, thank Delegate Hayes for sponsoring this bill. And frankly, Mr. Chairman, if I might, we do represent hundreds of small businesses, but we did see the substitute yesterday, and so with that, we thought we would condense our remarks and recognizing that this is a process, but I'm sure they'll be back in town and we'll be visiting your offices, because indeed they are very desperate to get these skill games back on July 1 of this year.
Thank you, Mr. Moran.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Stephen Hammond, Hammond Group Consulting. I represent Curro of Virginia. Curro is one of the largest operators in Illinois. They only operate in regulated states, which is why they are pushing for regulation, taxation, and enforcement here in Virginia. They operated during the COVID time period and have since taken all of their machines out of convenience stores to appease the state and their wishes through the ban. And we are just seeking, again, regulation to operate at full capacity in partnership with the state. And so we appreciate your willingness to move this forward, and we'd love to be a part of the conversations as we continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond.
Good afternoon, Mike O'Connor with Virginia Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Stores. Just a couple brief points. There has been a significant impact on the industry since Thanksgiving, since the games went away. And the way I hear it most often is from members of ours who say, you know, that many of the dealers are looking for extended terms on their gas payment deliveries, et cetera. So it's having a ripple impact, not just necessarily on the stores themselves, but on those people who supply them the gas. Just one comment on the substitute. I noticed that on page 59, 1546 through 1550, the substitute limits to 2 games at convenience stores and 5 at truck stops. I think it's going to be very hard to make any revenue estimates at those rates, so we would suggest or ask that that be revisited if that is a possibility. And thank you to Delegate Hayes for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Is there anybody who wants to testify in favor online? All right, you've left us some time. Can 13 minutes. All right, anybody who wants to testify against, please, that's in the room, please come down to the podium. Introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Scott Johnson. I represent the casino in Bristol, and in the sake and respect of your time, the casino operators have tapped me to give some consolidated remarks to this legislation. As to the number of machines and the substitute, when you do the math, there are roughly 18,000 ABC retail outlets. If each one can have 2, that means you're looking at 38,000 new machines. So when you're doing the physical impact on this, make sure that that's in place, plus another a number of machines for the truck stops. That's in comparison to the number of machines that are in place today. If you look at a historical horse racing, Rosie's, and if you look at the current casinos in operation, we've got about 6,000 machines today. So you're going from 6 and adding another 38 on top of it. Historically, be mindful that JLARC reviewed the casino plan and made recommendations before anything was undertaken by the General Assembly. Skill games have not had a JLARC review. That JLARC review has often been cited for the casinos, and we think that's parity. The other thing that's imperative is having a referendum. When Virginia passed a state lottery, we had a state referendum. Historical horse racing, when they go in any jurisdiction, there's a local referendum. Casinos in any local jurisdiction had a local referendum. Skill games has no local referendum. I submit to you, you did that and required a referendum because the people that you represent, you wanted them to have a voice in that piece. The other thing you have to keep in mind is for the casinos to come in the state, each of them had to commit $300 million in property and revenue and development. That is a significant investment. And if you have skill games to come in and dilute that, you've hurt the future economic growth on that piece. The other piece I would encourage you to remember is the criminal impact. We are seeing a growing number of reported cases where crimes have taken place at localities or convenience stores where these skill games are. And the final thing I'd leave you with is there's inadequate community protections in this legislation, and we're worried that that's going to make Virginians more susceptible to problem gaming. For those reasons, Mr. Chairman, we ask that this bill not go forward, and I thank you for your time and the committee's work on the substitute as well.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anybody else?
Chairman and committee, my name is Joanne Smith. I am a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of Virginia. The VFW supports our veterans, active duty, and charitable causes in our communities. We do not believe the General Assembly should allow skill games in every convenience store, gas station, bar, and restaurant in Virginia. Allowing skill games back in Virginia rewards those who have operated unauthorized while the VFW has played by the rules and followed the law. If legislators do approve these games, they should be heavily regulated and finally pay their fair share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
My name's Faye Willard. I'm a member of the Virginia Elks Association. Local lodges are one of the most charitable organizations in Virginia. The Elks do not believe this committee should give a free pass to gambling machine manufacturers that have been illegally operating in Virginia. The General Assembly was right when they made these skill games illegal in 2021. Delegates and senators recognize the damage these gray games were doing to the Virginia Lottery, charitable organizations, and other forms of legal gambling. We strongly encourage the Virginia General Assembly to continue the 2021 ban and not allow bad actors back into the state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Chairman Krizik, members of the subcommittee, I'm Aaron Palmer, Director of Government Relations for Churchill Downs. And here in Virginia, we just acquired Colonial Downs out in New Kent, and we have the HHR Rosie's facilities across Virginia. We want to make it clear that this legislation will have a direct and serious negative impact on the equine horse and racing industries in Virginia by reducing HHR revenues, the purses that they fund, and the thousands of jobs that we've created across the state. We operate in 30 states, 15 properties. We've seen this scenario play out in Pennsylvania, where neighborhood slots have contributed to a reduction in revenues, which forced the racing industry and horsemen to slash race days by 20%. If the Commonwealth authorizes an additional 90,000 neighborhood slot machines, it will lead directly to lower revenues for the state, lower purses at the track, and a diminished equine industry throughout Virginia. We believe the Commonwealth was right to enact this ban on neighborhood slots and ask the General Assembly maintain this prohibition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Hold on for a second. There's Delegate Simon may have a question.
No, not yet, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Next, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Gacke on behalf of the Family Foundation. I want to just make three points. There is no way to really place enough guardrails and protections around these machines to protect minors. If somehow a minor does play but can't cash out, that amounts to stealing. And the greater concern of this is the continual effort to desensitize youth to gaming. The second point is it hurts those who can at least afford to lose, which further harms the families in our communities. And there's no way to keep problem gamblers from actually playing these machines. At least with casinos, there are some protections in place, and that's not to be construed as an endorsement of casinos. And finally, let's be clear, this is an effort to line the pockets of big corporate gaming companies, not small businesses. This is not economic development, and there's enough gaming in Virginia already. So we strongly oppose the bill.
Thank you very much. Delegate Simon.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have some questions, maybe for the patron, maybe for council, maybe for you, but I've heard some things in the testimony. I just want to get some clarity about a couple issues. So, we heard about the referendum question, and if I look at page 52 of the substitute, in order to have skill games in your locality, the locality has to do one of two things, right? They either have to pass an ordinance to specifically allow them, or they have to have a referendum that they could put. So it doesn't have to be a referendum, but it's not like the old days, right, that I think people are worried about we're returning to, where all of a sudden you walk into your local convenience store and there's a bank of 8 or 9 or 10 of these machines that just appeared out of nowhere, right? They'd still have to be regulated by they have to be approved by either the adoption of an ordinance, going through all that process, all that public input, all the public hearings and things that it requires to adopt a local ordinance, and or a referendum before you'd start to see these in your locality. Is that correct?
Yes, Delegate, that's correct. In the the substitute, that regulation is in there included. Yes, and there's some other things which were mentioned and I will go through that.
Okay, I'll wait for you to do it.
But if you have another specific question,
No. The other
if
piece
I don't, go ahead.
is just the concern about keeping folks away. Yeah, I do see that it's illegal for the license. So they have to be licensed now, right? So they have to get a license to operate these machines. And the licensees, it's illegal for them to allow anybody under 21 to access the machines. And we have ABC officials, I know, that have all kinds of ways and all kinds of folks, lottery officials, that convenience store owners aren't allowed to let them buy cigarettes if they're underage. They're not allowed to have them buy alcohol. They're not allowed to let them do all kinds of things. And so actually these convenience store owners are fairly experienced and they're subject to sort of surprise enforcement if they violate these kinds of age restrictions. So it does seem like there's some protection built in for that as well. I don't know if that's a question or just a comment, but I'll stop talking and let you do your thing.
No, and yes, that's addressed as well, but it's good to point it out. Thank you, Delegate. Any other delegates have any questions for the patron? Is there anybody else? Well, we still have folks online, so there's 13 minutes left for the online testimony. Clerk will, do I just pick one? Okay, Jeb Hannum.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeb Hannum. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Equine Alliance. The Equine Alliance represents all the racing and breeding interests in the state. I just want to reiterate our concerns as articulated by the first speaker who is representing the casino industry, as well as Mr. Palmer, who's representing Colonial Downs and Churchill Downs. So the equine industry has grave concerns about the gray machines in general, and particularly with this bill not requiring a referendum, which we feel would be at the minimum would put the skill games in the same approval process that HHR and the casinos had. But we are concerned about the proliferation of gray machines in the state. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else online? Pamela Anderson?
Yes, good afternoon, Subcommittee and Chair. My name is Pam Anderson. I'm a Vitality Coordinator Pastor at the Richmond District, and I oppose the bill. There's more economically productive and sustainable ways for our community to work together for Virginia taxable income. I've seen the deteriorating effects that this sport can have on communities without having some kind of controlled professional settings like the casinos and the horse racing industries have commented on today. Respectfully, this bill is the wrong thing to do, and thank you for the opportunity for speaking.
Thank you very much. And I understand, I know that Ann Rogers is on there from DBHDS. She's the Problem Gambling Prevention Coordinator at DBHDS. If we have any technical questions, she's available. So she has online. Ann, is that correct? All right, thank you. She's nodding for the audience. Okay,
yes,
so there's plenty of time left. So thank you all for using your time wisely, especially on a Friday afternoon. And I know there's lots of people all over the Commonwealth that feel strongly one way or another on this, and we've heard some good testimony already. I do want to open it up to the committee members, but before I do that, I just wanted to say a few things. You know that I've been very adamantly opposed for a while, really on the idea. I'm not completely sold on even my substitute, but I am sympathetic, especially to the small convenience store owners, those merchants, and I've met with them. They are sincere, and they're the feeling that they are that these devices, let's face it, they're slot machines, really gaming devices, are what they need to succeed in the current market. And there has been a lot of upheaval, from COVID and different ways of people working from home and other things. And it's been difficult on all of us. And we're all very sympathetic. I know I speak for the whole committee in that respect. They need this, they've made it clear that this money is important to them to pay their employees and hopefully living wages. And they're also providing necessary goods in communities that don't have maybe a big box store or big grocery store. I too am a first generation American. Many of you may not know that, but my mother came over as a teenager, and my father's parents came over from Czechoslovakia, what was Czechoslovakia, now Czech Republic, and I know what it's that the work, that work ethic that's necessary to achieve the American dream, and I know this is a great nation, and hard work will get you a long way. But I do remain troubled by the scale at which these devices expanded. We had that one year, as you mentioned, Delegate, where they were registered by ABC, but not really regulated. They never did any age verification on players. They didn't go to the places outside of the ABC licensed locations, which is really where they needed to be, but that wasn't in their purview and their ability to go. So there were lots of places around the Commonwealth where there was 10, 20, 30 machines in locations where they weren't serving alcohol, so they couldn't do anything about that. So that's so my concern is, and I think the first thing that we all have to agree on is that the ABC is not really the right agency. And the other thing I'll say is we're in a period here in the General Assembly, and this is my 9th year, and I've seen it happen very quickly, where we went from a state that didn't have any gaming outside of what was happening at the VFWs and the different charitable gaming, and then of course the lottery, to a very expansive gaming state where we started with discrete locations with casinos, and we're already we have 3 up, 2 temporary casinos, 1 permanent one. We've got a 4th one in the works. We may have a 5th one coming. We also have up to 10 Rosie's Emporiums for the historic horse racing. There's 7 now, I think, in locations around the Commonwealth. There's 10 locations possible. There's also, of course, there's the racetrack itself in New Kent County. There's the over in Woodstock. We have the ponies. And we've got online sports betting, and we've got and even lottery has expanded with online lottery games. And so there's plenty of ways to lose your money, maybe win, but and we're still getting different groups coming to us. We've already had to nix a deal with Princess Cruise Lines, wanted to come and do a casino on the water. That didn't get through our subcommittee. I've heard that in the Senate there was a bill to have another casino referendum for what would be a 6th possible casino up in Northern Virginia. I think that bill has been tabled, but it went through. I think it did pass its first subcommittee that it was in. So things are happening, things are changing, and we've really been trying to do what we've tried to do with our gaming is to be very particular and making sure that we were really benefiting the Commonwealth, especially with the casinos where they would have to make major investments in those communities that were having a tough time, like Danville and Bristol, Portsmouth, and places like that. And so it's not just a casino you get there, you get a hotel, you get a music venue, you get quite a lot of other ancillary benefits and lots of jobs and lots of investment. And I think you can see the benefit, especially in Danville and Bristol. I think it's really doing well for those communities. And very few states have legalized skill game machines. And I will say that those that have, and I've done a lot of research on this, I know way too much about this issue, but the legalization was done after careful consideration and with comprehensive safeguards to protect communities against the negative impacts associated with these machines, or at least to mitigate those impacts. Some of those include gaming facility machine inspections, robust licensing standards, advertising guidelines, background checks, age verification to prevent underage gambling, referendums, as we've heard, and criminal penalties for violations. Unfortunately, in your bill, and it is, and I understand the process, it's the beginning of the, it's introducing the idea, but your bill doesn't have those safeguards, so that's why we're putting them on with this currently introduced substitute, and it really does check all those boxes. And a real critical piece of that is ensuring that Virginians do have a choice about what's allowed in their communities. So that absence of robust regulatory oversight is hopefully addressed with what we have before us with this substitute, with strict regulations and constant surveillance. We can make sure that young people, and also we have some problem gambling protections in here. We have a lot of we've really tried to put as many suspenders. What do we say? Belts and suspenders? That's the terminology I've learned here in the General Assembly on this bill, and to make this as regulated as possible so that it mitigates any kinds of problems, but still is beneficial to those C stores, those convenience stores that really are having a tough time. So we've got the guardrails and the robust regulatory environment. We've tried to do what DC has done with their skill games, and that's what the substitute will address. And so I thought we could go through it really quickly, but before we do that, we'll go through the chapters so that everybody kind of gets a quick idea. And I've got council, and let me just say, council has worked extremely hard on this. This has been, I know I can speak for her because we've been working together, but she's done all of the work. And I want to thank council very much because this has not been an easy process, and everything moves at light speed in the General Assembly anyway. But certainly, this is an overlay of what she normally does, which is already a lot of work. So I want to thank you, Ashley, very much for everything, and want everybody here to thank you too. I think it's very important. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Council, are we ready to go through this kind of we'll try to tag team it a little bit so everybody understands it, and then we'll have the members will be able to ask questions, and I think that'll work. All right, first we've got the definition of what we're calling an electronic gaming device, but it is a physical terminal, a machine, or other device, and it includes electronic or computerized devices that require the insertion of a coin, currency, ticket, token, or similar object to operate, activate, or play a game, the outcome of which shall be determined by the skill of the player. And that may deliver or entitle the person playing or operating a device to receive cash in excess of the cost of operating, activating, or playing the game. So this is a bill that's just about skill games. I want to make that clear for everybody. And it is also, as I said earlier, under the lottery. Then the next section really is where the games may be operated and how many. And you heard a concern about the maximum that we have in this is 2 games per establishment with 5 games per truck stop. I know that's less than the other bill had, I think, 3 and 10 or 5 and 10, I'm not sure. But that's where this bill is right now. And those are the only locations they have to be licensed to sell alcoholic beverages. And we also have some other safety precautions in here that they could not be within 2,500 feet of any public, private, or parochial school that offers instruction to children in kindergarten through grade 12 or any child care center. The distributor licensees are also required to install an electronic identification terminal at each host location that verifies the player's age, through the scanning of a valid driver's license or state-issued identification card. The terminal issues a player's card to age-verified players. The player's card is scanned or inserted by player at an electronic gaming device to allow the player to operate the game. As we mentioned, the local government restrictions, we have an ordinance adopted by the governing board of the locality to allow the gaming or a passage of a local referendum. It's up to them. And that referendum is limited to no more than once every 3 years in a locality. We have a lot on responsible gaming. Every gaming device has to have a label placed in a visible and conspicuous location that bears the number for the problem gambling hotline, and that all the these ABC licensee establishments would have to train their employees on how to identify patrons who have consumed excessive amounts of alcohol to prevent them from gaming while impaired. There's advertising limitations that would prohibit the licensees from advertising or marketing their products and services related to these devices, except on a website operated and maintained by them. The host location licensees are also allowed to advertise on one sign located at the host location, provided such sign is no larger than 3 by 3. So you're not going to see a lot of garish, flashing signs, big, huge signs, and you can't use the word casino either. Host location licensees are required to post at least one sign at the entrance that includes this language: 21 plus, toll-free number for the problem gambling assistance, the toll-free number, and the website of Virginia State Police's Office of the Gaming Enforcement Coordinator. Then we have independent laboratory review. Each electronic gaming device has to be approved by the director and undergo independent integrity checks by an independent laboratory. It can't be a laboratory that's owned by any of the companies that are involved in this. And the laboratory expenses will be paid by the manufacturer. We have 3 licenses and fees. Then we have a manufacturer's license, and that's the licensee. They would be the licensee that could sell or lease to distributors the major components or parts, including the software and the hardware for electronic gaming devices. They would pay an annual $1 million non-refundable fee. The distributor license, and all these fees, by the way, will go to the lottery for them to use to regulate, to be the regulatory body. Any money that's left over, if there is any, will go back to the general fund. The distributor license authorizes the licensee to buy or lease electronic gaming devices from the manufacturer and then supply such devices to the host locations, maintain and service such devices. They would be the ones who are responsible for the money. It would not be the convenience stores or the restaurants, or the truck stops would not be the ones handling the money. So that's also a safety precaution. They would have a $25,000 non-refundable fee as condition of licensure and continued licensure renewal. Then the host locations, which are those C-stores and restaurants and the truck stop, they would pay a $3,000 per device non-refundable fee to be paid upon licensure and a $125 per device annual fee. All those fees will be deposited by lottery into the existing gaming regulatory fund. Then we have some other important protections under licensing and application considerations. And this would be licensees are required to undergo criminal history records checks and fingerprinting. And there's some criteria in here where the director of lottery can refuse to grant a license or revoke, suspend, or refuse to renew a license. The license must be posted in a conspicuous location on the licensee's premises. The lottery may set license terms for 1 year or multiple years, not to exceed 5 years. So you could have a contract, the licensee could have a contract with the distributor, and it would only be maximum of 5 years, and it doesn't. You can't have an automatic renewal set in there. You would have to renegotiate that after 5 years, but it could be less. The transfers of licenses or interests are prohibited. Suspension, revocation licenses, hearing and appeals procedures are in accordance with the Administrative Process Act. Then this is very important. We have a voluntary exclusion program. This allows for voluntary exclusion for 2 years, 5 years, or a lifetime. That's what we have in Virginia for all of gaming. This list is cross-checked via connection to the central monitoring system when players use their player's card to play a game. So there would have to be a central monitoring system as well that would be able to help us to make this voluntary exclusion program work. And there's lots of people who know they have a problem in gaming. Let me tell you, gambling addiction is the #1 addiction of all for suicide. suicide gambling leads to suicide more than any other addiction, more than drug addiction, alcohol addiction, other kinds of addiction. But it can be prevented and it can be mitigated with this kind of a program, and it works very well when you're on that system. There's also, as I said, there's a central monitoring system that's really important. That would be operated by the lottery board, and each electronic gaming device and ticket redemption terminal will be connected to that central monitoring system, and it collects cash in, the payouts, the points, credits, or amounts played, the number of plays of the game, the amounts paid to play the game, the amount of gaming tax accrued, the door openings, the power failures, disconnections, remote activations, anything that happens, they would know about it. The price per play is really important too. It's $1 per play, $500 maximum. You can't have more than a $600 maximum because you would have to 1099 the winners, and you don't want to put those C stores at risk of violating federal tax code and all of the penalties that entails. So really, when you go to, we're going to make this legal, going to a convenience store to win $500 should be fine, should be enough. You don't want them going in there and winning $1 million or $5,000 or some big amount. $500, it's got to be less than $600 for that purpose. Taxation, right now this bill has a 30% gross profits generated from play of electronic gaming devices taxation, and we have an important distribution of those taxes. 10% of the gross profits would go to lottery and would be deposited in the Gaming Regulatory Fund. And as I said, if that's too much, that money will come back to the general fund. Of the remaining gaming tax revenue, we have 25%, and I tried to keep a lot of Delegate Hayes, what you had in your bill as well, some of the breakout. So I was trying to work that into this system, into this equation. So you'll hear some of that. 25% to the Department of Taxation for distribution to the locality in which the host location operates. So the localities are going to get a big chunk of this money. 5% to the Problem Gambling Treatment and Support Fund, which you had some money in there too. For that, 10% to the Department of Conservation and Recreation for state parks deferred maintenance. This is very important. We have a big $300 million backlog every year, and this would make a little dent in that. 10% to provide additional basic aid funding for public schools, which shall be apportioned to local school boards. I think this is from your bill, Delegate. And 15%, again, from your bill to pre-kindergarten programs for at-risk 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. 5% to the Virginia Indigenous Peoples Trust Fund, which we have in the casino bill, some percentage to them. And really importantly, 10% to the Department of State Police to be used by the Office of the Gaming Enforcement Coordinator. Anything left over, I'm not good at math, but you can do the math yourself, would go to the general fund. I think it's 20%. So the minimum age requirement also is really important. We have in Virginia, for all of gaming, it's 21 is the law right now. It would be the same in this case. The penalties, if the host locations were to violate any of these, it would be a Class 1 misdemeanor. For the illegal manufacture, distribution, or hosting of electronic gaming devices would be Class 6 felony. Illegal tampering would be a Class 6 felony, and conspiracies and attempts to commit violations would be a Class 6 felony. So this is a way, once this passes, if it happens and the governor signs it, we would really be able to tamp down all of the illegal gaming that might be going on out there and allow these convenience stores and restaurants and truck stops to do it under this robust regulatory scheme. And finally, the enactment clause has a delayed effective date to January 1st, 2025, and that is necessary for lottery to be able to get prepared for this and to hire the staff that they're going to need. And then ABC would be also in this bill providing assistance to lottery throughout the regulatory process. So I think it's a very robust bill. I don't think it does harm to yours. I think it just works on your bill, and I think it will help these stores to have their ability to make money. And I know this is the first process, and it's going to go over to the Senate, and we'll see how that process plays out. Do we have any other comments or questions from the committee? Delegate Simon.
So just thank you for the explanation. I do want to say that it's interesting, even the supporters of this bill didn't like it, right? So sometimes when both sides line up have problems with it, sometimes we mean that we've maybe hit the right balance where nobody's particularly thrilled. with where things coming down. I think a lot of the concerns that my constituents have had and that I've had in the past are addressed with this. Not everything, not 100% of them are addressed, but this is comes a long way towards giving us a vehicle, I think, that can get us where we need to be. I do have a great deal of sympathy for the small business owners who, during COVID, when things were bad, we relied on that. We took their money, right? We let them have the machines. We took the money. We used it. We spent it. And now we're telling them that they can't have their cut of it anymore because we don't need our cut of it. And so I think we need to find a way to be equitable about it. And again, I think this hits the balance. It addresses a lot of the concerns. I think a lot of the talking points that we heard from the folks in opposition may not have had a chance. I know it's a thick bill, but I think a lot of those concerns that we heard are addressed through this. The folks that are just against gambling are going to be against gambling, right? And I think, like you said in the outset, the horses left the barn on that particular issue. I think a lot of the opposition is from people that just want their business model for gambling to be favored over others, or they don't want this to cut into their piece of the action. So anyway, I think it's a great effort, and I look forward to supporting it for this part of the process.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Coiner.
Thank you. I have a list of some questions, and I don't intend to expect anything to be changed today. I know this is a work in progress, and as we work with the Senate, I will be the first to say I am not an expert on the bills that came forward in the past on casinos or on skill games or anything else. So some of these questions, folks who have worked for a long time on these may say they're covered, or council may know. One question I had was in regards to the tax portion and those buckets that things were going to be put in, whether there's any mechanism that are we collecting data on how much enforcement it's taking and how much problem gambling we're seeing to see if there needs to be some kind of automatic adjustments in the amounts given based on what they're seeing in enforcement and problem gambling out of casinos, what they're seeing in enforcement and problem gambling out of horses, the various columns, so that when we look at whether or not 10%, if that's the number is sufficient for this, or some kind of automatic mechanism to see that everybody who's in the gambling industry, if someone's causing more of a problem in the problem gambling area than others, that's where more of their money would be taken from. I don't know if that's been thought of, and how we collect data, kind of comparing what we're seeing, enforcement, so people causing problems and not obeying what we put in place, and then the problem gambling. So that's one placeholder that I had a question about.
Can I address that?
Yes, thank you.
That's great questions, and I have a little bit of data from the Virginia Partnership on Gaming and Health at VCU. They've got a survey that they found, and I will say that that's a fundamentally big. That question you ask is something that we fundamentally need to address, and Senator Reeves and I have been working on that issue. And we have a subcommittee that's coming up with the process to create a new agency that would oversee all of gaming in Virginia. And we're trying to also grapple with how much money problem gambling prevention and treatment needs. And you asked a great question. And but I'll just give you this statistic that right now, and this was a few months ago when skill games were still being played, the slots at casinos are 20% of the problem gambling problems that they've run into, and skill games is 18%, sports betting is 16%, lottery is 16%, and then it gets down to, when you get down to internet gambling with non-sports, 12%, I guess, and then the dogs and horses is less than 1%. So you're right, we do need to make sure that those gaming entities that are creating more problem gambling should be the ones paying more into it. And so thank you very much. Continue.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Bulova.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess to answer kind of the other part of what Delegate Corner was asking, and that is to make sure that lottery is kept whole and that it is able to adequately enforce this and has enough money to do so without having to constantly come back and ask for additional money or higher percentages. And when we met with lottery, they picked what I think was a very conservative number at 10% to ensure that there is that buffer and that comfort that they can operate within that sphere, and that if they have stuff left over, and I think they anticipated they would, that would get swept back up into the general fund. But they purposefully wanted to make sure that that was high enough, that there was a comfort level that they could do it within that revenue source.
Thank you.
Delegate, also, I think there was a second part of your question as well, and I think we do address some of it here in our council. Just we'll read it out to you and where it is in this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Coiner, so on page 50 in section 58.1-4201, dealing with the powers and duties of the Director of Lottery, one of the powers and duties that the director has under number 7 is to report monthly to the governor, the Secretary of Finance, and the chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance and Appropriations, House Committee on Finance, and House Committee on Appropriations, the total electronic gaming device revenues and expenses for the previous month, and make an annual report which shall include a full and complete statement of electronic gaming device revenues and expenses to the governor and the General Assembly, including recommendations for changes to this chapter. So that could probably address some of what you're talking about in terms of the money and where it's going, but that could also be beefed up, I suppose.
Thank you, Council. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I guess just to follow, and feel free, I have another question after this, if someone else has to interrupt me, but in follow-up to that, so I guess, I'm looking at the whole carrots and sticks, right? So we have all these different forms of gambling, and one way you incentivize people to do their own good enforcement and make sure they're paying attention to people who are problem gamblers, have a problem with gambling, is there's a money incentive, right? The less we're having to spend in these areas, the more money they get to keep. And so just trying to figure out how I love that section on the revenue that's being, and expenses, but maybe figuring if there's a way to automatically adjust in all of these areas. When you're doing a good job and when you're not, you pay more into the pot for these two things. When we see that your industry is not doing a good job, it's just an idea. And Mr. Chair, I do have another question.
Delegate.
Thank you. So I was a little confused around line 1570 on page 60. I've never drank in a convenience store, so I'm confused as to whether or not you're allowed to drink in a convenience store, because this, it seems to me that we're saying you should identify if they've consumed excessive amounts, but how, I wouldn't think we'd want people drinking and doing this at all in a place that is a convenience store. So I'm just wondering for clarification.
Delegate, this also covers restaurants, but we can make that correction. Good catch. Thank you.
Okay.
That's not a part of it, that we're not expanding that.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a new ABC rule.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one more question.
All right, Delegate, please.
My last question was whether or not we had anywhere in here in regards to where the machines are placed, of whether or not they're ADA compliant spaces. I've seen in some places there are super narrow hallways that people go back into, and I couldn't find anywhere in the bill if that was addressed.
Right. Council.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Coiner. There is language. So on page 48 of the bill, we define gaming area to mean the area of the host location identified by the distributor, licensee, and approved by the Director of Lottery in accordance with regulations promulgated by the Lottery Board for the placement and operation of electronic gaming devices. So that leaves it up to Lottery to determine the exact spacing, because spacing is going to be different in, say, a convenience store versus a restaurant that may hold an ABC license, or even in a truck stop. And so instead of putting all of those specifics under the gaming area definition, it is leaving the specifics that you mentioned up to board regulations.
And that, I believe, would include ADA. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I have one final question.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I didn't know if, similar to several years ago when we were having the debate over cannabis, back then retail cannabis. I did sit through that entire meeting about whether or not it had been included or thought of about a maximum % of gaming devices in historically economically disadvantaged communities, to see if we had thought about that in this legislation as well.
Council said that's all on me. We have thought about that, short answer. Does it address it? No. But it's a good question. And maybe that's something we can look at as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate.
All of my questions.
Any other delegates with any more questions?
Move to report.
Second.
We have a motion to report, and we have a second. Delegate, before we do that, do you want to have your last word?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, my friend.
Hold on. Thank you. Let's hold on that if everybody doesn't mind. Delegate Hayes.
Thank you, my friend. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, certainly as you deliberate, and we certainly know that it sounds like the way that things are going, there's going to be some opportunities for some continued development of what this will ultimately look like. Understanding after seeing the substitute 24 hours ago, 71 pages. In all fairness, we called off all of the supporters, owners of stores from every corner of the Commonwealth that were planning to be here. Hopefully we can make sure that those voices be heard. We know that in some of the comments earlier, and that many of the same concerns before we got into casinos being allowed here. There was a lot of concern about what negative aspects would spin off in regards to casinos. And now, I'll be the first to say, in a locality in which I represent as a part of Portsmouth, one of those localities that are permitted, there's enormous enthusiasm for the positives that spin off from that decision that the Commonwealth made. I'll say, I believe, and I've never played a skill game, I don't play the casinos. In fact, my roommate from college days was from Las Vegas. We went every year to visit him, even beyond graduation. But we were reminded by his father coming to town that this town wasn't built on you winning. So there is a difference between a chance at the casinos versus skill games. There are algorithms and some of these other machines that guarantee that there's a cap on how much is going to be allocated out and who's, I guess, going to keep the greater percentage as opposed to these skill games. The operators, the participants of the skill games, as they enhance their talent with it, actually can increase their chances to win. That's a difference in the casinos and then some of the other games that we have allowed. We just have to recognize that there are differences with these various types of entertainment, right? The same person that goes to a casino and loves to and will habitually or continually go there is perhaps a different constituent who would focus on going to the skill games in a convenience store. Research has shown that that's a difference in that constituency. Mr. Chair, when it comes to investment and skin in the game, I hear how the casinos up front made investments. But I don't hear the comparison in some of the other gaming industries that get business deductions for operating off of their taxes. So truly, there is a difference in that operation as well. When it comes to the enforcement, again, we're going to continue the conversation. We don't know where this is going to end up. But the original bill, underlying bill, talks about the enforcement of the ABC enforcement. And I can tell you, after working in and around law enforcement, I'm not sure, as I'm hearing, that the lottery are law enforcement officials as opposed to ABC enforcement. Revenue, we mentioned 130 million under COVID conditions in these stores when people were limited in going out, going to the convenience stores. So it's estimated that the revenue that this will bring in is over $200 million that will be able to positively impact the coffers of the Commonwealth that can go towards those services, those counselings, those programs to help those who have gambling problems. It can go towards education and many other needs positively here in the Commonwealth. When it comes to underaged individuals in the stores, we know in the convenience stores, there are folks who enforce and make sure that the kids or those underage don't buy alcohol. They don't purchase cigarettes. There are mechanisms in place to limit that activity. And we believe the same can happen with these skill games in convenience stores and restaurants. When it comes to the technology, we believe it's available and the opportunities are available through skill games because there are already examples where devices and software can be put on the machines and one would have to identify that they're of age. So we do know that that's an opportunity as well. Otherwise, the individual wouldn't be able to cash out upon being checked. It's already been said that the regulatory piece to this and the taxation is something that can make all the difference in the world. We know that under COVID restrictions, and even now, right? I have friends who are chiefs of police who, in recent conversations I've had with them, that there are literally people operating now, some establishments now, with these games in the stores, but we don't have any type of enforcement under the code to go after those individuals. So we must understand the illicit piece to this as well. I'll just stop there, Mr. Chair. I can go on and on. I was trying to continue to make remarks.
Delegate Hayes, I know it's late and everything. We still have another bill, but I don't want to cut you off. And I feel badly that you told everybody not to show up. Please use any amount of time. I think we speak for everybody here that this is your bill, and we're putting a substitute on it possibly. We're about to. We have a motion properly before us, but we're letting you have the time. I do not want to be cutting you off, so please continue.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that courtesy, but we don't have that opportunity for those individuals to be here now. We're talking 24 hours ago, but we do have the opportunity to continue the conversation. I just wanted to speak to some of the things that I heard today versus the full substitute that was introduced 24 hours ago. I'm sure it didn't take 24 hours to come up with that substitute, but we only had 24 hours to now respond to it.
I would say we spent more than 24 hours working on that substitute.
No, that's it's obvious to me that has happened. And I'm just saying, as we go along this process, it's hopeful
Mr. Chair.
that we'll continue.
Delegate Coles.
I'm just wondering, would it be proper if we give an opportunity during the full committee for a few members to speak if they have the opportunity to show up as well?
No, this is the chance, this is the time. This is what,
I
no,
rescind
let me
my
just say,
statement.
and Delegate Hayes, you know, I appreciate the fact that you only had 24 hours to look at the substitute. It's been, we've been working hard on it. It's not an easy thing to do. And we're trying to put a lot of, your bill was very scant with a lot of regulatory support, and it didn't have robust licensing. It didn't have background checks for criminals. It didn't have required notices. It didn't have central monitoring. It didn't have insurance requirements. It didn't have advertising guidelines. It didn't have criminal penalties. It didn't have local choice. It didn't have 21 and up. I think it may have had that. It didn't have lottery. But, and you decided on your own to not invite your folks to come, and that was never something that this committee, I mean, we put this in the biggest room in the General Assembly so that you could have everybody here. We're willing to go as long as it takes. So I don't want it to be said that we didn't give you that opportunity. So you still have the podium, and you may continue to speak. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you so much, my friend, Mr. Chair Krizek. I appreciate this opportunity, but there's an opportunity that we can't get back, and that is those individuals are not here to speak their case. And again, I know we're going to have the opportunity to continue the conversation, but I don't want to leave here today with the thought that every opportunity was given, because every opportunity wasn't. And we actually, through gentleman's agreement, understood that we'll continue the conversation.
And we are going to continue the conversation. There's no doubt. We still have to go to the Senate. They've got to bring their bill over here. There's going to be lots of opportunity. But we would prefer not to do this at the full general laws. Obviously, this is the opportunity, and I didn't realize that you weren't going to have them come. But be that as it may, this is where we're at. Do you feel like you've had a good opportunity to speak, and you're ready to hear the vote on the motion? Are you okay with that, or do you want to continue?
Well, again, we'll just continue with the conversation. I'll be happy to continue with that conversation.
This bill has got a long way to go. Thank you, Delegate. Thank you for everything. We have a motion properly before us, and it's been seconded to report with a substitute. The clerk will open the rolls. The clerk will close the roll. The bill reports with substitutes 6-0. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
We're going to take we'll take a 3-minute break, and then we'll have the second bill that's up. The subcommittee is reconvened, and I have a bill to present, and since I'm presenting the bill, I'm going to hand the gavel to Delegate Simon, who's going to run the meeting.
All right. Next on our docket is House Bill, what's the number? 698. 698. It's the only one left on the docket. House Bill 698 from Delegate Krizek. Delegate Krizek, would you like to present from your seat here on the...
If that would be okay with the chairman.
It's all right with me.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. So I just want to say that this legislation reflects extensive discussions with diverse stakeholders, and I feel it strikes the right balance on creating an adult-use retail market that promotes public safety and public health. Most fundamentally, the bill will give micro-businesses a head start in going to market with tax revenue support from the medical companies. Multi-state operators and small businesses, including businesses owned and run by individuals disproportionately harmed by prohibition, will start sales on the same date. The bill provides financial and technical support to small businesses, which are called micro-businesses in the legislation, to help them not only succeed in securing a license and starting a business, but also to succeed in the market over the longer term. It will create a new, well-regulated, multi-billion-dollar industry. It's a complex, far-reaching undertaking, and we really only get this one shot to make this retail market work in an orderly fashion. As you probably have read, other states have tripped up over this, and that's why we've got to get it right. And I think this bill does that trick. For that reason, the bill ensures a smooth rollout by establishing a realistic starting date for when the retail cannabis industry kicks off. The timeline for retail sales provides time for the development of rules to govern operation of the market and the hiring of staff to stand up and regulate the market. It will also allow market participants, particularly the micro businesses, ample time to get ready and be able to put the best foot forward once the market opens up. The legislation also establishes one of the lowest tax rates in the country for regulated cannabis, 9%. This rate will ensure regulated cannabis is priced competitively so that its sales significantly reduces illicit sales and enhances public safety and health. The timing of the bill is straightforward. On July 1, 2024, 60 microbusinesses will start cultivation and preparation for retail sales on January 1, 2025. On January 1, 2025, the 60 micros and the 5 medical companies will then be able to begin their retail sales. All other businesses will begin retail sales on 7/1/25. In the interest of time, and I know everybody's, I appreciate the few of you that are still here, and it's late on a Friday night. I'm going to dispense with most of my remarks here, but I do want to hear from the folks, some of the people here that have been working. I want to thank Virginia NORML, Marijuana Justice, and the medical companies, and even that I've had a little bit of input from the industrial hemp processor representatives and hemp retailers, which we have some faster licensure for them too in this bill. It doesn't create, let me just say, this bill does not create any mandatory minimums, but it does have new misdemeanors for things like selling to minors, selling without a license, diverting product, or violating certain regulations. The last thing I want to highlight is that we followed the recent successful Maryland program in many key respects, such as slowly rolling out the marketplace, focusing on a safe, tested product, making the product affordable through a low tax rate, using the medical companies to pick up the slack initially, and having a rigorous and well-funded social program which endeavors to assist those Virginians who have been harmed the most by marijuana criminalization. This bill would give them a fair chance to compete and prosper in this new economy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Krizek. So just to gauge, how many folks are here to speak in favor of the bill? Just don't come up yet. Just I want to see how many folks we have to deal with. Just about 5. How many people are here to speak against it? Just a couple. All right. So why don't we do this? Why don't we put, let's say, 8 minutes on the clock for either side? If we go a little over that, we don't need it. If we need more, rather, I can be flexible. But let's start at about 8 and see how that works out for everybody. Okay? So why don't we go ahead and come on up if you're here to speak in favor of the bill. Like I said, if it goes a little longer than that, we can adjust. Or if I'm way off, wildly underestimated, we can figure that out too. But let's shoot for this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, J.M. Padini on behalf of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. We're here in support of the bill and thank the delegate for his work on this important issue. I would like to point out on line 49 in the substitute.
Well, you know what we need to do? Let's first do this. Can I get a motion on the substitute? So moved and properly second, we adopt the committee substitutes. Many in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, so the substitutes properly before us. Thank you for that prompt.
You're welcome.
Well done. Sorry, on line 49 of the substitute.
Yes, and the patron and I had discussed this previously. It references previous 10 years, but is rather non-specific as to what date that is from. If
A suggestion for some improved language?
2009 to 2019, prior to decriminalization taking effect, at the point of decrim, arrests decreased by 50%, and in the subsequent year, they decreased by 90% when legalization takes effect.
So is that all language you want to see inserted, or what's some of the language?
2009 to 2019.
Okay. In lieu of the previous 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
All right, council, do you understand the gist of that line amendment? Okay. Does anybody, do you want to keep talking first, or what's the committee have, what's your pleasure on the amendment? Doug, can you consider that a friendly amendment, or you want to wait and take them all at the end?
No, I think it's a friendly amendment. Why don't we just move through them really quickly, because there's not going to be that many, I don't believe.
Okay. All right, so can I get a motion on the amendment?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
All right, moved and properly second, we adopt that line amendment. As many as favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, so that one's easy. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for bringing this bill.
There you go. That's how you testify. All right, go ahead. Alexander.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Alexander McCauley, representing Jushi, the medical cannabis processor in Northern Virginia. And I'd like the record to reflect that I'm wearing a green shirt and a green tie, and it's not St. Patrick's Day. And
we'll infer whatever we need to from that. I got you.
Yes. It's been observed, and it's true, that Virginia has a cannabis marketplace. It just happens to be illegal, chaotic, in some cases deadly for our citizens. This has been going on for almost 3 years, and it's well past time for Virginians to have access to a safe, tested, and taxed product. This bill, in our opinion, is a prudent and comprehensive solution. It strikes a fair balance between large and small operators. It's very important to emphasize that this bill prioritizes small businesses by giving them a 12-month head start and strong financial support. I'd like to comment on the accelerator program, under which the medical companies helped to establish 6 small cannabis businesses. We have to acknowledge that these accelerator programs have a mixed record in other states. Having said that, our belief is that if we approach this challenge with humility and a commitment to collaborating with the equity advocates, we can succeed here in Virginia. In closing, I'd like to thank the stakeholders who worked on this bill: Normal, J.M. Padini, Marijuana Justice, Chelsea Higgs-Wise, and Cannabis Equity Solutions, Philip Thompson and Jesse Frierson, who've all made major contributions to the drafting of this bill. But the hardest worker of them all is Delegate Krizek, who has labored over this bill since June. Thank you.
It takes several votes to get this out of committee. You might want to compliment some of the rest of us, too. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Jack Page. I'm a proud Virginian and founder of Dharma Pharmaceuticals. We are the medical processor in the Great Southwest. We appreciate the patron bringing forward this bill and the conversations that we have had and will continue to have as we bring safe sales to Virginians. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wise.
Hello, committee. My name is Chelsea Higgs-Wise with Marijuana Justice. I first want to definitely thank the patron for your hard work on this. I also want to thank the medical operators, Jushi, Alex, Normal, for this. It's really been a collaborative effort, and I just want to really make sure I say that on the record that medical folks have been very helpful, even with the equity pieces.
So this is the point of, if we were on the floor, we were all saying kumbaya. I got you.
Yeah, it is, definitely, and it's needed. But I want to bring a couple of things for discussion, and I'm also offering some amendments. The first thing I just really want to echo about some of the accelerator programs and the ways to tighten this up. There is a discussion I would love to continue to have about training for these micro businesses that will be getting hundreds of thousands of dollars and just being able to have that type of support as soon as possible. We know that is coming, but July is coming very quickly, and they will need these types of resources. Perhaps that could look like something like resourcing out to another cannabis training program in another state that's already stood up outside of that. But I do think that that training is something important to talk about. I'd also like to just talk about the money that is being promised up front. Right now it's looking at 1.2, which would be about $200,000 per micro accelerator there. We'd actually ask for that to be increased up to 2.5, and that's on line 1316, and that would give the accelerators over $400,000 each. So that would be almost doubling that number. And I think that's important because we have not yet looked at how much it actually takes to stand up a micro business, particularly to do that within 6 months. And that is something that I've also been able to talk to Alex about with that particular amendment.
So that's line 1,316. 316. Gives you a sense of the length of the bill. That's in the enactment clauses, it looks like.
Yes, correct.
With that, also in line 1317, we would have to
change the
200,000 to divide by 2.5 divided by 6.
So is that a friendly amendment as well, or is that something you want to think about?
Yeah, that's a friendly amendment.
All right, so on line 1316, subparagraph F, replace 1.2 million with
2.5.
2.5 million, and then do the math to get the right number on line 1317?
Correct.
So,
council, do you have?
I just don't think that math.
We would have to do, it would be like a little bit over 400.
Can we do a number that divides more easily by 4, is what I'm hearing. Because we're lawyers and math is hard.
This was the negotiation. We didn't get to the defining. 2.4 million, all right.
2.4 million, friendly amendment? All right, going once, going twice. All right, so the amendment was to go 2.4 million on line 1316, and what's $100,000 between friends, and 400,000 per on, which doubles essentially what's in the current.
Correct. Thank you.
Fair. All right. All right. Everybody understand the amendment? Can I get a motion on the amendments?
So moved, Mr. Chair. Second.
So moved and properly seconded. We adopt the line amendments. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right. Those line amendments are now part of the new substitute. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. And I also just want to bring up for discussion for other possible contributions from the medical operators besides the money. They might also need things like space, particularly to be up and operational by January 1. Perhaps there could be some sharing of facilities in order to cultivate. We're willing to keep that conversation going, but I think it's important for the record to think about how other states are also supporting accelerators and incubators besides money. There's also a discussion that I would really like to encourage us to maybe after this create a map of the historically economic disproportionate areas and how they overlap with the disproportionately impacted areas around policing. We are casting a very wide net with this, and I would encourage us to bring preference to those that have been impacted in the disproportionately policed areas. Finally, I have another friendly amendment on to line 439. Line 439 discusses the qualifications for the micro, which were formerly known as the equity provisions. As of right now, we have 6 different criteria, the 2 criteria that all have or in them. And again, because of the area and because of these 6 criteria, that is a very wide net. About half of the Commonwealth would probably qualify. So we are asking for a friendly amendment to give preferences to those that meet more of these criteria at a higher score and gave them higher access of securing a license.
Okay, do you have any particular language in mind that would do that? So instead of saying or, we give each of these, some sort of scoring system, or do you say the more of these you meet, the more preference you get?
Correct.
Something like that.
David, could you help?
Is that a concept that you understand, Council?
Perfect.
I'm sure you'll say it better than I just did.
Right.
All right. Does members of the committee understand the subcommittee understand the concept that we're trying to achieve there? All right. Can I get a motion to adopt a line amendment like that in concept?
Second.
So moved and properly seconded. We adopt the line amendment that would do that. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right.
All right.
Friendly amendment accepted. You're on a roll. Keep going.
Yep, and I got 1 minute, and so I'm almost done. And the other couple things we just want to continue to keep in committee's mind as we go forward, that we do like to offer a parity. So when we're talking about square footage, just looking at what the square footage of the current medical operators have as far as the canopy, and ensure that that does line up to what we are offering in an adult use market. I think we've done some of the math. I think we will be okay, but I think it's important for us to actually look at, if we allow 10,000 square foot for micro, what does that mean for all of the micro licenses, and what is their market capture, particularly after we have this referendum and we're dividing things by region. So that could be something that we continue to look at to actually see how much the square footage is with the existing and with not, and if folks can actually catch up. And finally, just looking at the transparency of the money, as of right now, it seems that that would go from the medical operator straight to the accelerator. We like this idea because it brings urgency, and we know these folks are going to need money very quickly. We just want to make sure there is something in there for transparency and oversight of that money, and that is actually done. And also a deadline, a deadline for when the money is to be distributed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, were there other folks that wanted to, here in the room? I know Philip Thompson, we're going to get to you. I see you there online. Were there other people in the room that wanted to get up and say very briefly who you're with and that you support the bill?
Yes. Good? Go?
Go.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for bringing this bill. I know how much work has gone into this. I'm Kayla Mock. I'm with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 400. Most of us know us as the food workers. However, we represent thousands of cannabis workers across the country as well. And so in this bill, I appreciate the sponsor bringing forward the study piece to study labor peace agreements. However, we respectfully ask that workers not have to wait for a study. The 2021 bill did include straight labor peace agreements, and would love to see that happen here.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else? All right. So we did probably about, Philip Thompson, you're online. Go ahead, Mr. Thompson, go ahead.
Yes.
We'll give you about a minute. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I want to say we appreciate and we support all of the amendments and comments that Chelsea Wise Higgins brought up. The focus here is we understand that, that however we move forward, one of the difficult areas is going to be is making sure we can get different minority people into these different categories. And we think that by focusing on more of meeting several criteria will help that along and get people into this business. We represent groups of minority entrepreneurs who are really enthusiastic about getting into this market, but we understand the natural barriers that minorities have faced with regard to financing, with regard to being able to get space and expertise. And we think that this bill is probably the best way. We've been working since the summer with the patron over in the Senate, Senator Evan, and we've been working with Alexander and through vicariously with the patron here in the House. And so we think this is a good way of moving forward, and we appreciate the House taking this bill up, and we hope that we can pass it along and work on anything that might need to be fixed later on.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. All right, those in opposition, come on down. And let's set the clock at, how many of y'all are there?
Give them 20 minutes.
Let's do about 8 minutes again. We're going to reset the clock at 8.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I don't want to use up all the opposition's time because I'm going to offer more of a neutral position, but thought this was the right place to jump up. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Greg Habib on behalf of the Virginia Cannabis Association. Really want to thank the patron for the work he's done. Really want to thank Mr. May for the work he's done. I'm not sure everybody knows how hard DLS's job is, and they're not just working on one cannabis bill, they're working on many, many, many. And so very, very, very much appreciate the effort that's being put in here. And you've heard from lots of stakeholders. There are many, many more stakeholders in Virginia who are interested in this bill. I think what all the advocates agree to is that we need to pass a bill. We need to have a regulated market. People talk about this bill creating a market. This bill doesn't create a market. We have a $3 billion a year illegal cannabis market. What we need to do is regulate that market, bring the public safety, public health aspects to bear. The Virginia Cannabis Association is actively working on all the legislation, specifically supporting Senator Rouse's legislation that is moving through the Senate. We believe these bills are getting closer to each other. There is still a lot of space between them, though, and we are not yet near being able to endorse this legislation. We think this still provides too many benefits to the large medical operators, and that's one of the things we want to continue to work on to make sure that everybody has fair and equal access to this market. In addition to the medical operators who have invested a lot in the state in anticipation of this market coming live, a lot of hemp operators from very small growers to retailers to processors have also invested a lot in anticipation of this market going live. And so one thing I agree most strongly with Delegate Krizik saying is that we have to get it right, and we get one shot to get it right. And so what I stand up today to say is we appreciate the conversation. We appreciate that this bill will hopefully survive through to conference. Some bill will give us the opportunity to work through the language, again, to not create that market, to regulate that market. We do have concerns with this bill as it's drafted, but we want to be good faith players in the conversation and appreciate the opportunity we've had to do so, and we'll continue to do so as we go forward. So Marcus is neutral. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that very nuanced answer. I appreciate it. All right. Actually, strongly opposed, or just opposed, whatever. I won't characterize your testimony. Go ahead and just do your thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Todd Gacke on behalf of the Family Foundation. Sorry to throw a wrench into your kumbaya moment. One thing I do want to start out with is on line 586. So we are strongly opposed to legalize and commercialize marijuana. But I want to, speaking to the referendum, we would prefer to see an opt-in as opposed to an opt-out. Localities should be able to decide that the default should be they're not there in their localities, and localities can then have the referendum to opt them into their area and their space to operate. That being said, we still feel strongly that this is not good for the Commonwealth. And I want to make a few little points here. If we have a law enforcement issue, then how can we believe that the Commonwealth is going to be able to hire enough people to monitor growers, conduct inspections, manage licensing? All of these are issues that we're seeing in California and Colorado. I want to address the issue of marijuana psychosis. It's a major issue. It's huge. Consider this: 7 years after Massachusetts legalized marijuana, doctors in Boston Children's Hospital say a full third of adolescents who come in for routine checkups report using marijuana, and then a third of those have developed hallucinations and paranoia. In fact, maybe you've seen in the news just recently where in California, a woman stabbed her husband 108 times because of a marijuana-induced psychosis. The defense claims she experienced a cannabis-induced psychosis after smoking marijuana, leading to a downgraded charge of involuntary manslaughter. She got off with 100 days of community service. The other point I want to make is, what message are we sending to our children? I want to read to you a few lines from the DARE program. It's a successful DARE program in our schools. I went through it. My kids have gone through it. Probably your kids have gone through it. Here's what it says. Additionally, several studies have documented the significant negative consequences of legalization, including increased illegal use of marijuana by minors, increased traffic accidents and traffic deaths as a result of driving under the influence of marijuana, increased emergency room visits with marijuana-related overdoses, increased number of hospitalizations from the use of marijuana, increased risk of addiction and use of other more lethal drugs. The National Institutes of Health reports that 1 out of every 6 adolescents who try the drug will develop an addiction. But listen to this. They say further, while the use of marijuana may be legal in a few states, it is still not legal anywhere in the United States under federal law. For these reasons and others, we are opposed to the legalization of marijuana. What a mixed message this sends to our kids about the legalization of marijuana. How can our kids ever take the harms of marijuana seriously when adults are not? We strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you. And we got about 2 minutes or so left. Again, we went a little over with the other group, so you want to make your
comment? I will, Mr. Chair, Delegate Simon, members, I will just, my name is Tom Intorcio with the Virginia Catholic Conference, and I will just associate my remarks with what the prior witness just presented. But in addition to that, I would like to speak to a couple issues because the bill is presented as being offered in the interest of public safety. And while this is not the courts committee, I think it's important for you all to consider some of the issues that may have been left out of this piece. Number one is THC potency limits. That should be in the bill. It's not. Instead, what is in the bill is an expansion of the milligram limit from 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams. The former bill under Senator Ebbins' bill from 2021 had a 5 milligram limit. That would be consistent with public safety and public health. 10 milligrams is way more than you'd want to start with. It certainly is imbalanced when compared to what you have done in the hemp area. So the hemp area, remember, is 2 milligrams or must have the ratio of 25:1 of THC content, Delta 9 THC content to CBD. So those are out of whack. And I would encourage you to consider that as you move forward. Finally, just to say that I think the bill also needs to take into account the criminal justice considerations with regard to transnational criminal organizations. The state of Maine's congressional delegation and its 2 senators have sent a letter to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. They sent a follow-up letter 3 days ago. This is every member of the Maine congressional delegation. They commercialized in 2016. They are dealing with 270 illegal marijuana grows in their state that are funded by the cartels in cooperation with Chinese nationals. The profits of that are going back to China. This is a national security issue in addition to a public safety issue in the Commonwealth. For these and all the reasons that were stated prior to my testimony, I would ask you to please revisit this issue, consider very carefully what you're embarking upon in the current world, global state of affairs that we're in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. As I expected, 8 minutes turned into 10 for each side, so that's how you get the 10 minutes, folks. Just a tip. All right. Delegate Coiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of remarks. I fully support that we do need a retail market. You know, having teenagers and being in the community, the market is there, we're just not regulating it, and we're not doing a great job of ensuring that we're protecting kids from products that shouldn't be out on our streets. I don't love the bill in its current form, so I want to be clear with that. There are things I think we really need to work on. I think we're really far apart from our Senate friends, and I think there's a path forward to get there. So I'm going to be supportive of the bill this evening in an effort to keep it moving forward. But we do have a market. Anyone who thinks that we don't doesn't have teenagers and going out places. So I'm in full support of moving forward in an effort to keep this bill working and coming up with a solution.
All right. Committee operates by motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
What do you move? To report?
To report as, is it amended?
With substitute as amended.
Substitute as amended.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Moorfield.
Yeah, speaking to the bill.
Let's get a second first.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Delegate Moorfield.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, members of the committee. Just to reiterate some of Delegate Coiner's comments, I agree. And I do agree with some of the comments that were made by the gentleman from representing the Family Foundation, although I believe it's unrealistic to say that or think that we would ever repeal the current possession laws in the near future. Or and with that being said, we do have a market, and so in my personal opinion, there is a need for a regulated market. Whether you agree with the situation that we're in or that we're not in today, we're here today, and therefore a regulated market is very sorely needed. We are experiencing overdose deaths every day, even in Southwest Virginia. And many of those overdose deaths are related to marijuana that's being laced with fentanyl. And so I think that unfortunately we're going to continue to see those types of overdoses until we adopt a regulated market. There are a lot of things in this bill that I do not agree with, but I think that we should be responsible and continue the conversation. But I will not be voting for it, and instead I'll be abstaining from the bill. But I do look forward to working with all parties and adopting something that is responsible, considering the current situation that all of us are faced with right now.
All right. There's been a motion properly seconded. We've had discussion. The motion is to report with substitute. The clerk will open the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Bill reports by a vote of 5-0 to 1. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to give you back the gavel. I think we may be done, though.
Thank you. We have, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, and second. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.